And it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter today, Carolyn Seasons. Please, it is our pleasure to have you here today as our guest presenter.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen and I'm excited to be here and share with everyone financial planning for a product-based business. So here we go. All right. So what we're going to be doing today is actually showing you step by step how you would go about building a one-page financial plan for your business. Now, I wanted to let you know a little bit about who I am. So I'm the owner of Finance Learning Lab, but my real goal today is going to be to help guide you through the numbers process. No matter what type of business you're running, you're going to have to learn a lot about accounting and finance. So my role today is going to be to really hopefully help you demystify some of the financials and really help you be able to take a look at some of the things that you're running with your business and the products that you're selling and help you kind of make sense of what does that mean in terms of finance and accounting lingo and how would I possibly use some of that information. So we're going to be all about making finance and accounting a lot more simple for you. Today is our goal. Now, you might be wondering, why would I bother creating a finance plan? If when you're starting a business, there's so many things that you need to be doing and thinking about. You might be wondering, do I really need to build a finance plan? It's, one more thing added to my to-do list. So let's talk through a few of the reasons that you might actually want to build this financial plan. So there's actually quite a few benefits to building a financial plan. What it lets you do is kind of very proactively monitor what you're spending money on. When you're running a business, it's really important that you're looking at the limited time and the limited financial resources you have so that you're spending it in a way to get the biggest bang for your buck. And so by creating a really simple financial plan, you can start planning ahead and seeing what's coming up on the horizon so that you can really make some adjustments to be able to ultimately make more money and spend and have fewer costs or spend your costs in a smarter way. The other really nice advantage of having a financial plan is that it lets you anticipate some of the pinch points that you might end up facing. This applies to all companies, but especially if you're in a product-based company. So when I say product-based company, I mean anyone that is selling a physical item. So maybe you're selling a craft, maybe you're selling candles, maybe you're going to be selling like the example that we're dealing with today, which is going to be beer through a brewery. It really helps you plan ahead so that you can kind of anticipate if you might have some pitch points with some cash so that you can really make some adjustments before it becomes crisis mode. The other thing that your financial plan can help you do is to be able to step back and really be able to identify potential new revenue sources and new revenue streams. So by putting it down and putting it on paper, you can kind of get a bird's eye view of everything you're doing in your business and everything your teams and your staff might be doing. It gives you that bird's eye view to step back and to say, wait a minute, if we tried this or if we tried that, here's where we could actually bring in some additional revenue. And then last but not least is to stop feeling so stressed, right? One of the areas that, when you started your business, probably finances and accounting was not the area that you were like the most excited about, right? It's kind of one of those things that, yeah, I know I'm going to have to deal with this. But actually by equipping yourself with a financial plan, it can really help you take some of the stress away, some of the financial stress away for your business because you know what's going on and you're kind of the one that's empowered. So we're going to build a financial plan today for a case study business. It's going to be for a brewery, and we're going to walk you through the steps that we're going to go through. Now, I'm going to imagine that most of you are probably not running a beer brewery, but hopefully you'll be able to see that a lot of the same concepts that we're going to go through will be very, very similar for your own business. So you may not be shipping beer, but maybe you're shipping clothing or some other physical type of product that you're going to be shipping. Hopefully you'll be able to see the parallels across both of them. The other thing that I kind of want you to keep in mind as we start diving into the financial plan is that remember that the audience for the financial plan is you. You as the business owner are the one that's going to be using this financial plan. So all along the way, if there's anything that you're coming across that's making you feel kind of confused or overwhelmed, just take a deep breath and remember that you as the owner are the audience of the financial plan. It's a tool that's in place to help you run your business better. So you can simplify it, you can adapt it to really meet what your needs are. The intent is for this template that we're going to walk through to be something that's going to help you run your business better. So make sure that you always keep that in mind and you kind of say, how do I customize it? How do I tweak it? How do I make this something that's a tool that's really helping me run my business? Like any of these templates, you can make them really, really complicated, but at the end of the day, make it fit for your purpose and make it fit for your business. So we're going to try and keep it relatively simple, but I'll show you a few bonus sections along the way if you really want to do a few more complex or a few more advanced things as we go. So I guess the final really good reason to actually create a business plan is if we go back to Benjamin Franklin's very famous advice, which is if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. So by creating a financial plan, what you're really doing is taking all the plans and all the dreams you have for your business, and you're kind of filtering it all together onto a one-page financial plan that will really help you drive your business forward. So if you're ready to dive in, what we're going to do is shift gears. We're going to pretend we're going to introduce you to Raj and Raj's Brewery. I'm going to share a short little video clip so you can get an idea of what we're going to do. And then we're going to get our hands dirty. We're going to dive straight into Excel, and we're actually going to go step by step, and we're going to be building this financial plan, this one-page financial plan for his business. So with that, I am going to introduce you to about a 1-minute clip where you'll be able to find out a little bit about Raj, a little bit about what's going on in his business, set a little bit of the context, and then we're going to dive immediately into Excel and we're going to get hands-on. So if you do have any questions along the way, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we will also take have some time at the end to be able to take some questions there as well. But if you're coming across something and you're kind of feeling like, stop, it's going too fast, or can you explain this a little bit more, feel free to jot those in the chat and we'll jump to them right away. So we are going to be, this is the link you'll be able to find in the chat. This is where we're going to find the video, but just so you know, this is also where you can get an editable version of the Excel template. So if you like, you can pop to this here link and you can start filling it out as we go. You can actually edit it and put in the information for your own business if you want to follow along or get a copy of it later on. And there's a few other materials and resources you'll be able to find in here. But without further ado, let's meet Raj. All right, so now you know the scenario and the case we're going to be going through. I'm going to pull up the Excel sheet, but maybe I'll just check very quickly to see if there's any questions that anyone has so far before we actually dive right into the Excel document. Okay, all good. All right, so we'll keep going. So this is going to be the template that we're going to actually walk through. This is going to be, if you've ever used Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets, really what we're trying to do is to keep it really simple. And what we're going to do is actually help Raj translate all the different things that are going on to his business, really put it together onto a one-page plan. Now, Raj's story is really similar to the challenges that a lot of business owners face. You know, they start a business because they find a particular product or a service area that they're incredibly passionate about. And they learn everything they can about creating this product, and they really become specialists in that particular product area. And sometimes they're even getting really positive response from their customers. They're getting really good traction. And so what they end up thinking is, hey, customers are liking what I'm doing. I'm really busy. Things seem to be going well. Obviously, I must be making money. I must be really profitable. But without having an actual financial plan for your company, what you can end up with very easily is a situation that Raj is facing himself with, where he's really busy, but ultimately what we're going to see is that he may actually be spending more on his business than what he is actually making. So we're going to walk through that and we're going to see what he can possibly do so that his brewery actually not only makes his customers happy, but also enables him to really earn a good living from his brewery as well. So this is a template of what a one-page finance plan looks like. And what you're immediately going to notice, just to give you a lay of the land, we're going to in a second dive into the nitty gritty numbers and start populating them in there. But I want to take a second just to help you get oriented. Now, some of us, whenever we see numbers or spreadsheets, it's human nature that your brain, your eyes glaze over and your brain just shuts down and just says, I don't know numbers. But don't worry, this isn't going to be, we're going to keep it simple. And again, always remember that this is something for you to adapt for your own business. So you're going to notice something really prominent on here where we have the months of the year all along. We have January until December, but you'll notice that really prominently, we're distinguishing between what happened in the past and what's happening in the future. So what we're really going to be focused on with our financial plan is what's happening in the future. Now, you will still want to be able to do bookkeeping and taxes and those type of things that are focused on what happened in the past with your business. But if you're Raj and you're looking at your brewery and you're trying to say like, how can I make more money? What you're really going to be interested in is what's going to happen in, October, November, December, what's going to be happening into the future, because it's what's happening in the future that you can actually influence, and you can really do some things to increase your revenues and do some things to spend and incur your expenses in a smarter way. So number one, what you're going to want to notice is along the side, we're kind of breaking things down into a month by month view. And we're really dissecting between what happened before. So we're going to say January to August, and into the future, September to December. So I guess we're technically into October, but we'll treat September as still live. Now, the other thing we're going to notice here on the side is that we've really broken this one-page plan into two sections. We've said everything that's happening with your company is either what we're going to call revenue, which you might hear of as like sales, what your customers are buying. In Raj's case, it's going to be the wholesale beer that he's selling. It's going to be an e-commerce site where he is selling beer through his website. And it's also going to be some sales that he's having at the farmer's market where, he set up a stand and he's selling some of his beer directly to some customers at the farmer's market. All three of those are examples of what he's doing that in finance and accounting language, we call that revenue. You might also call it sales, but we're really going to call this the revenue, and we're going to break down his different revenue streams. Now, remember, your revenue might look different, right? You won't be selling beer, but you might still be selling things wholesale. You might still have a website where you're selling products, or you might be going to farmers market or different locations. So the product you're selling might be different, but the concept will be really similar. So section one is going to be all about revenue. That's the money coming into your business. Now, section down two, we call it expenses. And expenses is just a fancy way of saying, what are you spending money on? Where is your money going? Who are you spending money on, and what are you spending money on? So here, your expenses might look a little bit different, but what we're going to do is kind of come up with a brainstorming list of what are all the different expenses you're going to incur in your business. So we're going to walk through this in a bit more detail with Raj, but we're going to see that Raj has a whole range of different expenses. He's going to have people helping him actually make the beer. He's going to have barley and all the other ingredients that actually kind of go into creating a beer. He's going to have some shipping costs to be able to get it from his brewery to the actual customers that are going to be drinking it, and a whole range of other costs that we're going to kind of walk through in there. So use this as kind of your triggering thought. Chances are, unless you're running a brewery, you're not going to have barley, but chances are there's going to be other raw materials that you're going to be using to kind of purchase for your business. Okay, so far we've covered two sections just to get you oriented in here. The top section is the time periods that we're going to be looking at. The next two sections are revenue, which again is fancy language for saying money coming into your business from customers, and then expenses, which is really just going to be the laundry list of everything you have to spend money on to actually operate your business. Now, the two other things that I want to call out over here on the side are really just kind of sections for you to put in your notes, because remember, when you're building your financial plan, the person that you're building it for is you. The whole point of you building this is so that you can step back and you can kind of say, wait a minute, what am I missing? Or what are really cool opportunities I could use to grow my business? We have a parking lot here where you can put in some different outstanding issues. Now, again, it's human nature when you start building a financial plan that your brain starts to think, oh, wait a minute, I'm forgetting a receipt for this thing here. And then you kind of go down a whole rabbit hole of finding something or whatever. This is your parking lot where you can say, okay, I'll just jot that down there so I don't forget about it for later. But it allows you just to kind of go back to what you're trying to build, which is a one-page plan. So just use that as your notes. There's no right or wrong way for how you're going to track outstanding issues. But you could use it to kind of say, well, not really sure what my price will be, or I'm not really sure how many cases I'll sell. Use this just for any outstanding issues that come up in your mind, just so that you kind of don't get sidetracked while you're still working on something. And then the bottom part here, opportunities. This is where once you've actually populated your plan, what really makes your plan valuable is whenever you take that step back and you say, wait a minute, what are my opportunities to increase my revenues, right? What could he possibly be doing to make more money, right? How could he be selling more beer? How could he be, getting into more locations? Kind of like coming up with his brainstorming list of opportunities. And secondly, what could he be doing to reduce some of his expenses? So maybe he'll look and he'll say, hey, there's a different supplier I could use, or what if I did this, or what if I did that? So these two sections on the side are really just there for you to be able to type your notes, type anything that comes to mind as you're building your plan, and kind of as your step back opportunity, where you're actually going to be able to kind of figure out how do I make more money through a financial plan. Okay, I'll do a quick check. Is there any questions, any burning questions that anyone has before we go on, or are we're okay to kind of take them at the end? Hearing none, let's dive into Raj's situation. Okay, so what we're going to do in here, this is where we're going to actually start populating it. And you'll see that I have a few in here that are populated already as examples for Raj. I'm going to just kind of hide them so that you can kind of see as we're going along. What we've really done here for Raj is we've kind of said, we've taken all of his revenue and we've broken it into two variables. Now, what do I mean when I say two variables? Well, I've really said he makes money based on the price that he sells the beer for and how much beer he sells. So we've got price times the number of units equals his revenue, right? So in Raj's case, he happens to have what we call three revenue streams. So revenue stream number one is his wholesale beer. That's a revenue stream. And what you'll notice that we've done in here, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so that hopefully you can kind of see on the screen a little bit easier on here. So we're right up here at the very top and we're looking at his very first revenue stream. And so what you'll see that we've done is we've said, okay, what is the price for one case of his beer? And he's like, well, I sell my beer for $22 a case. I'm not a big beer drinker, so I'm not sure if that's a good deal or not, but we're going to go with it anyway. So he sells a case of beer for $22 a case. And then he's going to try to anticipate and he's going to say, well, I think I'm going to sell in September or in October, I think I'm going to sell 1,000 cases. So what's actually going to get populated in here is it's going to tell him how much total revenue will he make from that. So this is where he can play around in this template and he can say, well, I wonder what would happen if I were to change the price of my beer to $23. So I want you to notice right off the bat here, he's going to be making $88,000 this year. But what if he says, I want to just increase the price of my beer. I want to increase it to $23. What we can see is his revenue, again, just his sales from wholesale beer automatically increased. We can kind of see where that went up. But he might not know exactly that he's going to sell 1,000 cases. He might actually only sell 800. What would that actually do? Or maybe November is like a really big, let's say October is Oktoberfest. It's a really big beer drinking month. So what happens if he actually sold more that month? We can actually see in here by changing these two variables, we can see what that does to his revenue or his sales. And remember that any business out there, you can always take your revenue stream and deconstruct it into the two variables, which is the price of what you're selling and how many units you're selling. So that's what we kind of do. He kind of looks at it and he makes his best guess about how much wholesale beer he's going to be able to sell. The concept becomes very, very similar when we look at his second revenue stream. So in addition to selling wholesale beer, he also has his own website, his own e-commerce site where people that are a big fan of his craft beer can just go and buy it from him directly. And so in those cases, he's actually able to sell the beer for $30 a case. And he can kind of play around with all the exact same variables in here. If he were to change his price to 31 or his quantities to 750, you'll see that what it's really doing is adjusting for you the ability to say, if I play with the number of units I sell and if I play with the price, what does that change in terms of my company's full year revenue? And the exact same concept happens right down here on the bottom where we actually look at the farmers market sales. So we can see that maybe he gives a bit of a discount at the farmers market, but always what you're noticing is it's coming down to those same two variables, the price and the number of units. And so down here, what we end up seeing is the total. So we see that this is the sum total of all the revenue he is making from wholesale plus e-commerce plus farmers markets. So this is really telling him all the money that is coming in. Sometimes we call this top line revenue just because it's kind of what he is making before he spent all kinds of money to actually create the beer and make the beer and get it to people. So what we see in here, you can kind of gauge at the very end, it gives you a way to kind of project or really like guess into the future how much beer is he going to sell, and he can make some different adjustments along the way. Now, one of the things that I think people sometimes have some challenges with is if Raj has been running his brewery for the last 5 years, he's going to have a pretty good idea of how many beers he's going to sell on his e-commerce site and how much he's going to sell at the farmer's market and how much he's going to sell. And he's going to have a pretty decent idea of what customers are willing to pay. But what happens if this is Raj's very first year, right? Raj has never run a brewery before, so he doesn't exactly know. These are his guesses, right? He might not 100% know how much he is going to sell. And usually when people are in their first few years of running a business, creating these forecasts can be really, really hard because you don't have a history to be able to say, well, how much did you sell last September, right? In an ideal world, you would just go and you say, like, what happened last year? But oftentimes that is not going to be, you're just not going to have that data stream. So there's two different strategies that you can use when you're a little bit unsure of what your revenue is going to be. Strategy number one is where we create different scenarios. And so a scenario just means that instead of having one plan, you actually have your base plan, and then you kind of build a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. And so again, anytime that you're forecasting, you're really just doing your best estimate of what's going to happen. So this is what I would kind of think of as, we sometimes call it your base case, but it's just you making your best guess of your crystal ball of how much you're going to sell. But maybe Raj knows, you know what, I know that this is my very first year running a brewery. I know that I'm probably not going to make the I'm not going to know immediately what it's going to be. What could Raj possibly do? So he's built what he really thinks this year, September to December, are going to make this amount of money. But what if Raj's partner is saying, I just think you're way too optimistic, Raj. Like, I think you're a dreamer. There's no chance you're going to make all of that. What can Raj do? Well, what he can do is actually build a worst case scenario of this plan. And so what you'll notice that I'm doing down here, I'm kind of taking his original plan, I'm right clicking, and I'm creating move or create a copy. And I'm just going to create a whole nother copy. So all we've done in the very bottom in here, it's the same as kind of copying and pasting. We just created a second version of it. But what we might do is actually call this worst case scenario. So this is where Raj might say, and he might call this plan on the page, he might actually call it worst case, right? And he can create as many of these different scenarios, but he might be saying, look, what if people don't really like my beer and they're not really willing to spend $22 on it? What if they only want to spend $19 on my beer? And he can actually change all of these different variables in here. And he can actually say, what if I only sell 900? And he can kind of play around with, again, always the same two inputs, your price and your number of units, and you just apply that to however many different revenue streams you have. So what he can do down here is say, you know what, it's only going to be $20, and he can kind of play around with it. And what he can also do down here below is to say, you know what, September and October, I'm going to be really busy. I'm actually not going to make it to the farmer's market at all because I'm going to be so busy doing other things. He can remove that completely. And he can say, you know what, in December, I'm going to be traveling as well. I'm really only going to be at the farmer's market in November. And he's going to delete all of that. So all of those different adjustments let you come up with two different scenarios. So remember, the first tab that we had in here is kind of showing what he believes is his most likely case. And what you're going to see again here is revenue is 255 based on all the assumptions he's making. But because Raj is new to the beer business and he's not quite sure, he created a second version of his plan that kind of tells him, if things go really wrong, what am I possibly looking at? Like what maybe would this end up looking like? And you can see that he would actually make significantly less money using these different scenarios. So what he can actually do is he can kind of start planning and he can kind of say, you know what, if in October and in November I'm seeing that my sales are a little bit lower, what are the levers I could pull to be able to increase that? Or what are the adjustments I can make to my own lifestyle to be able to still make it with my business, even if my sales aren't quite so high? So that is one scenario that when you're building your financial plan, if you don't know what these inputs should be, one of the nice ways that you can kind of work around it is to have a base case one-page plan, but then to also create a copy that's your worst case. And if you wanted to, you could even create a best case. It just gives you, again, always go back. Your one-page plan is for you. It's by you, for you, so that you, in this case, Raj, can say, well, if this happens and worst case materializes, is my business still a good idea? You know, am I still going to be able to pay my bills? Is everything still going to be good? So a worst case scenario is one way you can do it. And just to recap, if anyone is new to using Excel, just to show you how I did that, what I did is I clicked down here below on the template. I right clicked with my mouse and I went to the option that says move or create a copy. All we're doing is telling the system, like, make a copy of this one here. And I clicked this little button, create a copy, and I clicked OK. And this is where it just basically created an identical tab that we could turn around. And this one, if we wanted to, we could actually call it our best case. You can really modify and adapt this to suit whatever is going to be ideal for what you're doing. So that is one scenario that you can use to kind of refine what those estimates are going to be. Now we're going to go into the expenses, but I want to show you the second scenario, or the second technique, I should say, that can help you figure out what things are going to cost. So let's pretend again that we're Raj. Raj knows all about beer. He knows pale ales. He knows I'm not a big beer drinker, but he knows all about different types of beers. But he might not know, what does it cost to run a brewery, right? Like, he might be pretty new to what some of these costs are. If he's been running a brewery for a long time, he'll be able to look at it and say, like, what was it last month or last year? But he's brand new. So how is he actually going to find some of this information? Well, there's going to be a couple different strategies that you're going to do on the expenses side. So number one, what you're going to do, and again, your business won't probably be building or making beer. It'll be something else. But number one, where you want to start with is grab a pen and a paper, a blank piece of paper, and brainstorm, walk yourself through the process to brainstorm what are all the expenses and things you think that you're going to have to spend money on. So Raj would grab his pen and his paper, and he'll just start creating a laundry list of what are all of the items. What he's not going to do right away is get really caught up on what individual items are going to cost. Step one, all you're doing is creating a list of what are the categories. He's going to do step two is going to be where he starts to do some research to figure out what will shipping cost, what will a bottle cost, what will a website cost. He'll do all of that, but that's going to be step two. Step one on expenses is coming up with the categories. Because if you completely forget a category, like for example, you completely forget about website, well, it won't matter how refined all of your different expenses are, you completely missed a cost category. So step one, grab your pen and paper and jot down, brainstorm a list of what you believe all the expenses will be for your business. So in this case, he said, well, I'm going to need people to help me make my beer. I'm going to need raw ingredients, right? Like, beer doesn't come out of thin air, right? It doesn't magically appear. You put barley into it. I'm going to need cans to be able to pour it into. I'm going to need to be able to ship it, to actually get it from my brewery to other places. And oh, what about the fancy cool labels that go onto my bottles? And I might need some people to kind of help me run my business. There might be some additional people costs. There might be some people making the beer, but there might also be some office people helping me run it. I might need to do some marketing so people know that I have this great new craft beer out there. Of course, I'm going to need a website. He might have some interest. He might have to go to a bank to be able to buy some big equipment, and he might have some interest. He might have some depreciation on equipment. I'm not going to go too much in detail on depreciation for equipment because it won't apply to all of you, but I'll put it in the most simplified terms. You can kind of think of this in a non-technical term as being like the wear and tear on the really big equipment he needs to make his items. So you're going to try and estimate what those are. Again, we won't go too much into detail on the depreciation pieces, but if you are facing that as kind of a challenge, reach out anytime and we can kind of chat a little bit about how you can estimate that. But be sure if you are in a really equipment heavy area, you might be thinking about depreciation. What about rent and utilities, right? He might need a warehouse to be able to keep all of his beer stored. And we don't always like to think about it, but energy costs money, right? To keep the lights on, to heat the building, there's going to be utility costs. He might need to have insurance, right? Some of these expenses are ones that we commonly end up forgetting about. At some point, he might have repairs and maintenance. Like what if his equipment, fingers crossed in a perfect world, the equipment would run perfectly forever, but realistically at some point, there's going to be a few things that go wrong. So you want to kind of be planning for some of those expenses. Maybe he's going to need a lawyer or an accountant, and maybe he's going to have some other categories. So what he will have done, and the same process that you are going to go through, is simply grab your pen, grab your paper, and brainstorm that list of the different categories. And then you're going to go into the template, and you're going to populate them. Now, two things that you'll do to kind of get those expenses kind of listed is you'll come up with this particular list and you might be able to ask other people that are in this business or other advisors where you can kind of go to them and say, am I missing anything in here? One of the common challenges that people run into, and that might be Raj's scenario, is he might actually have been running his business and have completely forgotten that he's going to have to pay for insurance and repairs and maintenance. And maybe he never even thought about shipping cost. Well, if he had planned his entire business and completely forgot about those expenses, guess what? He's probably not going to be making nearly as much money at the end of the day as he had thought. So that's why you want to get that complete list of expenses and ask people that you trust or people that really know your industry to take a look at it and to say, are there categories I have completely forgotten? Now, the other thing that I was kind of alluding to before, which is, okay, what if Raj knows no one that's ever run a brewery? He's the first one that's dreamt up running this brewery. He just doesn't know anyone in his network that he could actually come across. I'm going to show you a really neat government tool which can help you find similar companies. So I'm going to take you to the link here where you can actually see what it looks like. So this is a resource from Government of Canada, and what it gives us is some data points on some other companies, just so we can kind of come up with an idea. So he can run this report, he can enter all the different parameters in here, and he can actually decide to browse through and find his specific business. So he might know he's manufacturing, right? Because he's making a particular product. So he would kind of go through and he would say, well, okay, no, I'm not making dog and cat food. I'm definitely not making like sugary foods. I'm not making fruits and vegetables, but he might just kind of keep scrolling down until he finds a section on beverages, not making tobacco. There is a section on here for breweries. Let's see if we can actually find it. He would kind of navigate all the way through and he would find his specific industry. Let's see where it is. It is on our, here we go. Here's his brewery. So he would kind of select the brewery and he'll kind of create a report. And what that is actually going to give him is an Excel spreadsheet. He would just go under here, we'll export to Excel, and he'll be able to find out what have other companies in Canada, like what are they spending on some of these things? And that can kind of help him get an idea of what his expenses might look like. So this is kind of what the report looks like whenever you pull it out. Now, if you're anything like me or like most people, you're going to look at this and your eyes are going to immediately glaze over because you're going to say, oh my goodness, this is like 500 data points. I know a lot about beer, but I have no idea what this report means. It's a whole bunch of data. I can't make any sense of it. If you feel like that, stop, pause, take a deep breath. What we're going to do, we've actually done for his case, is actually curate that exact same report. So this is the brewery report that he pulled. um, what we actually did is we just said, let's only focus on the parts that are relevant. So we just kind of said between this tab here, we just kind of eliminated all of the rest of the noise. So you can really focus on this first column that gives you averages. So all we've done between what we actually pulled out from that report here is we've just kind of curated it down. And so the way we would read this report for his business is it says, okay, Raj, we did a sample of 700 other businesses that are in the brewery business. And their numbers might not be perfect, but it gives you a little bit of an idea. And they categorized it all together. So what he would do is start to look through. And again, we can see at the bottom, we pulled up what's called the NAICS code for breweries. Yours might be different. You'll just browse through to find your business industry. And he'll be able to look through and he'll say, okay, well, what do other people that run breweries like, oh wow, they spend 184 on labor and commissions, people cost. Oh wow, they spend $57,000 every year on rent. Oh, how interesting. They spend 33,000 on advertising. It's just a data point. His business might be different. He might choose to spend something different on different categories, but it gives him just gives him a way to think through and just a bit of a sanity check to again say, have I completely missed an expense altogether? And is my estimate of what I'm going to spend on this expense, is it even in the ballpark, right? So everyone will be higher or lower. That's okay. But it just gives him one more data point to say, what might it cost me for my brewery? So that is one report that you can actually use whenever you're creating your expenses, is that particular report. And so you'll be able to, if we kind of jump back in here, the template that we have on our website will have all of this in here, and you can kind of find this link to where I just went through, and you can go through the same process to be able to do that same kind of search for your specific business in your specific industry. Okay, but let's come back. So we've covered quite a bit so far. We talked a lot about his revenue and how with his revenue, what he was doing is figuring out how much is he going to sell and what are the two variables, the price and the units. And he kind of said, well, I can have a worst case scenario. We kind of came through all of those. Then we moved down to the expenses and we said, let's make sure that we capture all the categories of expenses he's going to need for his brewery. So he's going to brainstorm his list. He's going to make this great big laundry list of what it's all going to be. He's going to ask people that he knows to say, what else am I missing? He's potentially going to go and run that report we just ran here to kind of say, give me a ballpark idea of what are other breweries spending money on. So now he has a little bit more information to start populating the rest of like the nitty gritty. He knows his categories. He knows he isn't missing any categories. Now he's got to go and make his best guess of what he's going to spend money on. And so this is an area where you might refine over time. But what he's kind of doing is coming through with, he knows his categories and he knows, how many people might be working in his brewery or how many people he's thinking of hiring. And very, very similar to what we did on the revenue side, he'll play around with some of these numbers. So he'll say, you know what? I actually don't think I'll be at like full staffing capacity until maybe November. So maybe in October, I'm still going to spend a little bit less. And maybe the cost of some of his products, he thinks that over time, he'll be able to get it for a little bit less. So all he's going to do really now that he has the categories is go line by line by line and really just populate his best guess at what these costs are going to be. Is he going to be 100% right? No. There's no one on earth who creates their forecast and gets it completely perfect. But remember that that's not your objective when you're creating your financial plan. In a perfect world, you would get it absolutely right. But the reality is you're making your best guess and your best estimate. So he's going to try to get it as close as he can. But it's okay if it's not completely off. It's him trying to inform what he should be doing. So he's going to populate what he thinks the bottles and cans are going to cost, the shipping. Now, what this can let him do, and kind of when we So what he'll kind of work all the way down all the different categories of what he thinks he's going to spend money on. He's going to populate each of these. And it's going to give him a total of expenses. So if you remember up above, we have the total of all of his revenue or sales. Down here below, we have a total of all of his different expenses. Now, what you see on the bottom line is really just the mathematical difference of all the money coming in, all the money going out, and what's left. What's the bottom line? So we can see that in Raj's case, the bottom line from his business is 34K. So he's running an awesome brewery. He's putting his heart and soul into it, but he's actually making about 34K at the end of the day. So then he can kind of decide and say, like, is this worth it? What am I making money with it? The other thing that he could do is he could kind of go through and very easily flag. Let's say that he didn't realize what those were going to cost. And let's say he thought that the shipping was going to be quite a bit more, or let's say some of these expenses were quite a bit higher. By individually putting in his estimate of those expenses, what he can get an advanced signal for is, if you notice down here how that popped to being red, that is his advanced signal to himself to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Red means that in the month of November, he's going to be making 64K in sales, but he's going to be spending $176 in expenses. So he's going to be losing money. So if we kind of go back to everything we talked about, why you're creating a financial plan in the first place, it's so that you can avoid these pinch points and you can step back and you can say, if you were Raj and you saw that the bottom line went negative, what would you do, right? So you would step back and you would say, okay, I've got a problem. If that's going to be what's happening, how can I either make more money or how can I adjust my expenses? So what he might do is to kind of pop down some different opportunities over here. So he might say, well, maybe I could find a new bottle supplier that has a lower unit cost. Or maybe as I really grow my business and I get more volume, I could get some shipping discounts, or he kind of play around with a few different things. So this gives him like an early signal or an early warning. The other thing it actually lets him do is he can kind of, again, think of this as your kind of like your dashboard, right? It's almost as if you're like an airline pilot and this is giving you a view of what's happening in your business. Well, what he can actually do is he can kind of do a sanity check and he can say, wait a minute, way up here, I said I'm going to sell like 1,000 cases of these and 9 cases of these and 500 cases of these. Is it really realistic that my bottles are only going to be $900, right? He might actually know that his bottles are going to cost, let's call it 25 cents a bottle, and he's going to need, let's call it 12,000 bottles. He can start to come up with an estimate to say, hold up, there might be some gaps in my overall plan. Now you can make your one-page financial plan as complicated as you want. So the template is there as your starting point, but always remember it's a tool to be able to help you. So you can very easily adjust some of these different inputs. So some of the items like his shipping, he might know that his shipping depends on how much he is selling. So what I did up above here was I really just took the cost and I kind of did the same concept that we did under revenue, which is number of units times the price equals your revenue. Well, some of these costs like shipping, it might actually be a unit cost to ship. How many you're shipping, that's your cost. So he could either enter his shipping as saying, you know what, I know shipping is 6,500, or he might think that, you know what, I know it costs me $1 to ship a case, and I think I'm going to ship 3,000 cases, let's call it. So he can actually adjust these different lines based on the variables in his business. So some of you, your business costs will be very, very flat. For others of you, will be very variable. So if it's variable, you'll notice that all I did in there, if you kind of look up at the very, very top here, what I did is I entered the word equals number of units times, this little star means times, or sorry, I should repeat that, equals the unit cost times the number of units. So exact same concept as what we did on the revenue side. Really all you're doing for certain of your expenses is to figure out what's the unit cost, how many units equals total expense. So you can adjust all of this for your specific business and really kind of be able to tweak it. But always remember that the real power that comes from a one-page plan is the way that you step back and actually make decisions based on it. So Raj would have gone through all of this, populating all of it, and he would have come all the way, he'd kind of like step back and he'd say, okay, I've now built my whole plan. I know what my bottom line is going to be. What strategies can I do? What can I think of that could help me make more money, increase my revenue, or decrease my expenses? So he'll use this as his overall, kind of his overall thought process as he's going, right? So under the revenue, we talked about a few of them. It might be increasing his price, increasing the number of sales. Maybe it's introducing a new product line. Maybe it's something different that he's doing. And then under expenses, it might be something where he kind of says, how could I do this for less money? Or, what are some strategies I can do so that my bottom line is a number that I really like? I'm just going to very quickly touch on a bonus section in here, and then I'll jump to see if there's any questions. So this is kind of how you build a financial plan. Some of you will be a little bit more advanced, and so you can actually shrink out this section here if you're using quite a bit of inventory. I'm not going to go into a lot of the inventory in this particular session just because it's a little bit more advanced. But for those of you that think that you're going to carry a significant amount of inventory with your business, what you can actually do is go down under here and you can just unhide it. And again, this is a bonus section. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I have no idea what she just started talking about, don't worry about it. You will be so much further along, even if you just do this top part. But those of you that are looking for bonus points and really, really refining it, the bonus section is where you would kind of think of it as where you're projecting your balance sheet. Don't worry too much about some of these terms, but where you would actually be populating and saying, well, how much inventory do I have? Inventory is just a fancy way of saying, cases of beer that I'm ready to sell. Or maybe for you, it's, a craft good that you've created a whole batch of them that are ready to sell. So you can kind of populate some of those. You can kind of start projecting and saying, well, I actually think I'm going to have 50,000 units of inventory sitting in here. And you can actually go a little bit further to include some bank loans that you might have. The total down here will just signal to you if anything is off for your balance sheet. I don't want to go too much into detail on this bonus section because it probably won't apply to most of you, but for those of you that are more advanced, you absolutely can use this section under here. So I'm going to hide it. Again, for those of you that aren't going to have significant need for the balance sheet, pretend we didn't go through that whole piece and just focus on the top section that we went through on there. That I think is the main things that I really wanted to kind of take you guys through. So in a second, I'll kind of ask to see if there's any questions or if anyone wants to kind of walk through some different examples. But I would kind of recap by saying the key takeaways you want with a finance one-page plan is always remember it is a tool for you. Never let it be something that scares you or intimidates you in any way. This is something intended to help you make better decisions with your business, and you can adjust it and refine it and make it fit for what you're doing in your business. So never let it be something that feels like, oh, someone gave me the scary template. Remember that it's your tool for you to be able to look at. Try to think through your revenue, break it down really simply into number of units and prices, and really remember that it's about the thought process that you're going through, the real planning aspect of figuring out what if the worst case scenario happens or what if this. That's really what you're building out in the revenue section. And then in the expenses section, what you're trying to do is to make sure that you're capturing all the expenses you're going to incur and that you're being reasonable in your guess of what the expenses are going to incur. So remember in Raj's case, if he hadn't gone through all of this, he might have priced his beer and run through his entire business without realizing that, oh, I didn't know I was going to have to pay for this, and I didn't know I was going to have that, and I didn't know about this, and ultimately find himself at the end of the year realizing, he actually lost money. Whereas by taking the time up front to put it together, he can both avoid losing money and also find some really neat ways to be able to ultimately increase his sales and kind of have a more enjoyable process as he's running his business. Yeah, that is kind of, I think, the overall pieces I wanted to walk through with you guys. Is there any questions that have come up? Is there any areas you'd like me to kind of dive into or anything that I can kind of elaborate on? All right. Well, if not, I'm going to plop into the chat where you can kind of find all of this information if you'd like to build it out for yourself. So I'll put the link in there where you'll be able to find it into the chat. Here we go. So you'll be able to find, this will be the link to where you can kind of get this copy of the template. So again, you can kind of watch the little case study video for how we did this for Raj. This is where you can get that same template that we were walking through so you can use it and edit it for your own purpose. And then down here below is where you can kind of just get a recap of some of what we covered under here. We do have a few free resources on our website. So our website is financelearninglab.com. So we actually have a few kind of free resources just to really help people. What we're really all about is like helping people make finance and accounting less scary and less intimidating, because I think when you really understand those pieces, you can run your business better. So we have all kinds of different games and different courses and different things that you can find in there. And we also have a YouTube channel. So if you just type Finance Learning Lab YouTube channel, you'll be able to see we have probably 40 or 50 different videos that teach all things small business numbers, small business, accounting, all of those pieces.